What does the Gilded Age lack? Life is the answer. We're met in a stifling, pompous drama. Doubt is lively, energetic, and busy. Gilded Age is like trying to get dust off of an old throw pillow. Not that there aren't benefits. We went on a little trip this week instead of getting rich in New York. Everyone mostly moves to Newport. Variety makes life more fun. The trip is mostly about romantic relationships, and everyone is into someone. But Burr and George Russell were the only couple that really clicked, and we only get to see them make out for 3 seconds in the conservatory. If you're going to have socially repressed people in the movie, they need to hit the wall at some point. In high society, the other thing that people can do is stare deeply and passionately at Lord's "I love Mr. Darcy" when they think about Gates's social situation and her choice to marry Darcy. It's strange that George, whose family has a good name, is less stressed than his wife Bertha. It was strange to hear him say that he wants his girlfriend to marry him out of love, but it shows that George Russell can be a softie when the time comes. He just never had his workers form a union. The second episode of The Gilded Age's second season starts with Glades putting off going to the Russell family's new Newport estate, until she finishes replying to Oscar Van Rie's marriage proposal. Oscar wrote to George asking for Gladys' hand in marriage. Glades isn't in love with Oscar, but he and his daughter talk about the proposal in an open way. Finds his marriage proposal interesting, as long as he makes her laugh and lets her choose for herself. We all know that Oscar only wants Glades for the money, though. George tells him that marriage is not the right time to find freedom, and you can be sure that Julian Fellows scrolled this line illogically into his script while he was thinking, "Dan, I'm fine," even though George is a smart businessman and knows she didn't ask him to marry her because she loved him. He might not know what Oscar likes when it comes to sexuality. George tells Glades that she shouldn't get married until she finds true love. He promises to support her in this, and that they'll do it in a gentle way. Oscar isn't gentle at all when it's time to watch, so let him down for now. He and CM Oscar are not in class. They are with George. George politely turns down his offer of a marriage of convenience, and then kicks him out of his office. Oscar is even more depressed after George shuts him down in last week's show, in which a drunk and upset Oscar got in trouble for approaching a man in a bar after feeling ignored by Glades. After that, he lies on his mom's couch like a sad fish. Oscar is sad, and Aunt Agnes is still mad about her niece Moran's unpaid work as an art teacher at a ladies' school. Even though Moran is showing that she is a great teacher, Daisel and one of her students, Francis Montgomery, like her. Maria's cousin-in-law is Dash's father. Aunt A&S is not mad that Peggy Scott wants to work as her secretary again, but she is mad that Moran is able to find work on her own. Agnes is so nice to Peggy. She just needs to save a little of that. Agnes tells Marion that even though Peggy is kind, she is not a blood-rated person who'd hurt the family's image. Peggy says Armstrong won't be a bother, even though she knows that Miss Armstrong is racist and that Peggy quit her job because of it. Last year, Amos told Armstrong that he should treat Peggy with more care, but Armstrong wasn't ready to make a commitment. Amos told Armstrong, "Your fate is in your own hands. You might still be able to keep your job if you are kind enough to Miss Scott." Ma'am Armstrong doesn't agree. Armstrong can keep her job as long as she doesn't say racist things, but it's hard to break old habits. Even when they do talk, Armstrong still treats Peggy like a friend, and Peggy tells her off by quoting Wise and Sage. Candy Burris once said, "Don't start, and there won't be none when you get there." Having fun in Newport with Glades, Russell, and Barra. Larry, a young engineer, gets a new job fixing up Widow's house. Susan Blaine and newbie Laura Benanti for Season 2. Richard, Miss Blaine's husband, was really sleepy after he died. He left her at home with his money and ran away. And the desire to enjoy her youth, which she felt she had wasted on a guy. She doesn't hide the fact that she looks up to Larry, who is younger than her. He sees a good house in her, but she only sees a good person in him. This episode of Gilded Age is one of the most direct ones about sex that the show has ever had. Even though Larry and Mrs. Blaine have been seen kissing and even being naked before, it's clear that they had sex. Bertha is very worried because it's clear that they have had sex. She tells her son that good women don't sleep with men half their age because her main concern is how the relationship will affect their family's reputation in the future in the plant room of their mansion. Bertha and George look like they're having sex, even though they've been married for a long time and no one else in society, not even Oscar, can. It's Moran, Dashio, Montgomery, etc. who gets to Newport, and they all go to the casino to watch a tennis match. Larry's Harvard classmate Sears is playing in a match. While not directly related to the plot, it is important to remember that Sears was a real person and one of the first famous American tennis players, given how often the name Sears is mentioned. By putting Moran in touch with Edward Morgan, Charles Fien's colleague, Aurora Fien tries to do her a favor, but Morgan is a boring, drunk, and dashing Moran, makes several cross attempts to get away from him. Has there ever a more accurate representation of what it's like to be a woman? It's interesting to note that Marion flirts with Larry Russell, who misplaced Notice and cousin Dashiell at the tennis club, while they're doing their hardest to save Moran from Morgan. Dashiell tells Marion that he owes her a treat because she helped him with a wage on the game, which he wins. This offers them the opportunity to spend at least one more moment together in the future. We've heard a lot about how poor Olent Ada has never found a man in the Gilded Age season opener. But before you worry that she might pass away as spinster, a term that comes from older single women who worked as wool spinners and is related to Ada's love of needlepoint, you should know that it seems like it's cuffing season, or rather collaring season, because has a thing for the Reverend Ford. If you're worried that Ada of mine might start dating a clergyman, don't be. He's an Episcopal and is free to be married. The Reverend, who just moved to New York from Boston, pox his way over to have tea with the van, although it's more of a distraction than a character trait. Rye Leonard's Boston accent isn't the only one that hasn't been mastered by an actor. It's not his fault that it bombards him with personal questions during the tea, and when he leaves, Agnes scolds her for it. Agnes scolds her sister, saying that hardened criminals have answered fewer questions in the dock while dealing with ladies revealed. George Russell's nicer side, but we also saw his mean business side when he learned that workers in Chicago were on strike to protest their pay and working conditions. Russell's business could be in danger if his iron and steel workers in Pittsburgh did the same thing. So he tells his right-hand man, Clay, to bribe Henderson, the union representative in Pittsburgh, to keep his men in line. Clay is afraid that Henderson is a man of principle, which turns out to be true. In order for George to bribe Henderson in person, Clay and Russell set up Henderson's trip to New York. George surprises Bera by going to Newport to attend a party hosted by Mr. Mallister as a way to relax. Brett finds out from Mr. Mallister that Mr. Joshua Winterton, an old friend who is rich, and his new wife are planning to attend the party. It's possible that they will be willing to help Para's efforts to support the Metropolitan Opera House report. When the Russells meet the Winterton family, George is shocked, and Bertha's blood runs cold, because one of Miss Turner's former students, Mrs. Winton, who was fired the previous season and tried to win George's heart, is now married to a wealthy family and left the Russell home after being fired the previous season. Turner told George, "Perhaps we'll meet again." From what we could tell now, she knew she was playing a game the whole time. Oscar found a new form in Maud Beaton, the woman who may or may not be Jay Gould's child from a previous relationship.